This will be our 9th year crossing the country in our RV, and along the way we stop at a lot of LGBTQA campgrounds.
And we are increasingly being asked, what are these campgrounds, why do they exist, and who is welcomed? I'm James.
I'm Paul, and of course our trusty travel companion Chompers, and we're going to get into what is an LGBTQA campground and who's welcome there. In our 9 years of going across country, we've stopped at 31 of these alternative campgrounds, and the one question we always get asked is, what's an LGBTQ campground and who's welcome there? So before we get into that though, let's talk about some definitions so we're all on the same page.
That's a lot of letters.
Yes.
LGBTQA. So LGB is probably quite obvious. Lesbian, gay, bisexual, which is sexual orientation, right? Transgender is a gender identity, and the sexual orientation of a transgender person can be the whole rainbow.
So you can identify as a male and be attracted to males, or you can be attracted to females. Gender identity does not mean sexual orientation. Those are two very different things, and
Exactly.
I think people get confused about that a lot.
The Q, I think, is just queer or questioning, and that's someone maybe who's on their path of discovering who they might be, or discovering what the options are and how it applies to them and how they see themselves.
And they seek out a safe space. They want to go to a place where they can explore and discover learn
themselves. And of course the A are allies out there. Allies who let us all in this spectrum feel comfortable and feel safe.
and be who we are.
So with some of those definitions under our belt, now we get to the campgrounds. Why do they exist? How long have they been around? What for? We didn't really know about them when we started this journey, and we've learned there are so many out there and more growing.
But to understand where they came from, we really got to go back into history. So what we understand is the first LGBTQA campground in the U.S. started in 1980. So let's take a really quick trip back to 1980, which is the decade we grew up in. So we have firsthand experience. In the 1980s, most states had sodomy laws. And sodomy laws meant if you had sex with the same gender, you were breaking the law. In the 1980s, there was a patchwork of these laws all across the country. So you could not legally, in most places, have sex with the same-sex partner without risking breaking the law. So you might not believe this, but it wasn't until a 2003 Supreme Court ruling that made all sodomy laws in the U.S. invalid.
Nationwide.
And at that time, there were still 14 states in 2003 that it was illegal to have same-gender sex.
Hard to imagine and hard to remember that. If you're
So
of a certain age, or you're of a certain age, that's an amazing thing. 2003, think about it.
So you can imagine what it was like in the
80s.
80s.
In the 1980s, there was a patchwork of laws on the state level that did not protect gays and lesbians from being discriminated against in housing, for a job. You could be fired just for simply being or announcing that you were gay or lesbian or trans.
It wasn't until a 2020 Supreme Court case that ruled that LGBTQ people were protected by the 1964 Civil Rights Act. So up until that time, you could, in many states, be legally fired and lose your housing. So let's go back to the 80s when these campgrounds began. It was illegal in most places to have same-sex sex, and you can be put in jail, you can lose your job, you could lose housing. So what were people who were LGBTQ trying to do? Trying to find each other in their community. And that's where the LGBTQ campground started.
Now, certainly in major cities, we had gay neighborhoods, gay bars, gay restaurants, coffee shops, certainly, but you still had the risk of discrimination at any time, of being completely open. And I think this is what we see as the beginning of this era of having these completely safe spaces in these gay campgrounds, which were private membership campgrounds.
The majority of the campgrounds started in the East and the South, and they really were designated as safe spaces for LGBTQ people to meet. And remember, this is before the internet, before apps.
Yes.
So if you didn't know where to go, it was pretty much word of mouth that got people to understand, oh, there's a campground, and on a weekend I could meet other like-minded people. You might just be looking for friends, someone you can relate to, or a person to date. But this was really where the need for a gay campground started.
So since the 80s, there certainly has been an evolution of these LGBTQA campgrounds.
There has, and in our last 9 years, we've seen a resurgence in popularity of LGBTQ campgrounds.
And even a lot of new ones every year.
Lots of new ones.
Like.
And I think as gay bars close and more people go online to meet people, there's a feeling of missing community. So we've seen a resurgence, especially with the younger generation, of people finding and seeking out these campgrounds because they want a sense of community and a safe space where they can be.
Very popular and getting more and more popular from what we see year after year.
And I call it summer camp for adults. It really
I mean,
is.
it kind of is.
Because every weekend they usually have, games, dances, barbecues. It really is a summer camp for adults. You get to see the same people every weekend, and it really is a community feeling. I think that's kind of what we're missing now with, the advent of apps and things like that. So this is growing again as another safe space for people to be with like-minded people and just be comfortable with themselves. In our experience, we've seen about 4 different categories of campgrounds. We've seen gay campgrounds that are basically focused on a gay male. So if you're a biological male, you're welcome at that campground. We're not lesbians, but I'm assuming there's a lesbian network of campgrounds that maybe if you're a lesbian and you're a woman biological, you're invited
and
there.
we may or may not be welcome to there.
Yeah,
I don't know. It depends on the owner of the campground.
Then we have what we would call male presenting. And that means if you're a biological male or if you are presenting as a male, you're welcome. And that generally tends to be a male-oriented campground, regardless of how you were born.
Right.
The third category is LGBT. And that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans. And that really is men or women who actually identify anywhere on the sexual orientation spectrum or gender identity spectrum. So it's men and women getting along, and it's pretty free.
And these aren't words we're necessarily coming up with. These are the ones that we see campgrounds identify themselves as.
Or who their clients tend to be.
Right. And so the final letter, of course, is allies, which is basically come on in and have a good time, and there's no discrimination, and everyone feels like a safe space for them.
And let's talk about that for a minute. LGBTQA campgrounds. Anyone can come as long as you're an ally and tolerant, because remember, the idea of these campgrounds is to create a safe space.
Right.
So no matter who you are, as long as you're accepting and you will abide by making it a safe space for everyone to be there, you're welcome to be there.
No homophobia, no transphobia. No phobias whatsoever. It's just a place to have community. So this is becoming a dilemma for campground owners.
Yeah.
Again, we've established that they're running a business, and we're seeing the campers our age and older who've experienced discrimination in that really appreciating the male-only space.
Absolutely. And we get stopped by a lot of younger people who didn't grow up in that era of discrimination, who maybe are millennials. They have straight friends, gay friends, trans friends, and they keep asking us, where are the campgrounds I could go to and bring my straight friends, my trans friends? So there seems to be, in our opinion, what we've seen, kind of a dilemma on who's welcome where, and a lot of it, from our opinion, can be from how old you are and what you grew up in. So the big question, who's welcome? Well, the answer is it depends. It really varies by campground. And I would encourage you, if you wanted to go to one of these campgrounds, to reach out to the owners and say, what is your focus? Who are you welcoming? And what is the vibe?
Most of the websites are pretty clear about their policies.
Absolutely.
But if you have further questions or comments,
reach out to them.
Why not?
We're going to be going across country again this year, and we're going to stop at lots of LGBTQ campgrounds. So we're going to continue to do our blog on what we experience. And so if you like that and you like this video, we hope you did, please give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe, and you can follow our adventures and the things that we discover as we look at more and more new LGBTQA campgrounds.
And if you hit the notification button, you will be notified when we upload some new information.
Absolutely.
Until the meantime, if you'd like to write some comments below, we're curious what your opinions, what your experiences are at these campgrounds. We can all share through knowledge, right?
Absolutely.
Until then, we'll see you on the road or at the campground or by a campfire or pool somewhere.
That's right. Travel safely. Bye now.
Take care, everyone.